Who is the Doctor? Ever since Doctor Who began 57 years ago, the identity of its main protagonist has been a central concern. Initially, the character was synonymous with the actor who played him, William Hartnell. He was the Doctor, the one and only. Then in 1966, as a practical workaround to Hartnell being unfit to continue in the role, the production team devised the concept of regeneration, a process by which the Doctor, at the point of his death, is able to metamorphose into a new body. Suddenly, Hartnell's character was not simply the Doctor, but the first Doctor, succeeded by a second incarnation played by Patrick Troughton. For the first time in the show's history, the Doctor's identity had changed. The extent to which the Doctor had changed is another matter. Fundamentally, he still took the form of a white, middle-aged male, a set of parameters which quickly became the default for subsequent actors to be cast in the role. Occasional variations in age aside, Peter Davison's 5th Doctor and Matt Smith's 11th being notably younger than the rest, this is a template to which the following 10 Doctors all roughly adhered to. In July 2017, history was made when it was announced that the 13th Doctor would be played by a woman, Jodie Whittaker. The show's 12th series extended the definition of what the Doctor is, has been and can be further than ever before, with the introduction of a hitherto unknown incarnation played by black actress Jo Martin in Fugitive of the Judoon, and the eventual reveal in The Timeless Children that the character existed in a multitude of other forms, of various genders and ethnicities, prior to those that she, and we, were aware of. Influenced in part by the writings of the feminist critic Helen Ciseaux, this video essay will argue that, despite regenerating into a woman's body in Twice Upon a Time, it is only in The Timeless Children that the Doctor truly comprehends what it means to be female. In light of Ciseaux's assertion that woman has always functioned within man's discourse, and that now it is time for her to displace this within, explode it, overturn it, grab it and make it hers, I will consider how the introduction of Doctors that are female and or black during Chris Chibnall's tenure as showrunner reflects a conscious desire to move away from the rigid stereotype of the character as a white British male, and instead transform regeneration into a celebration of gender and racial diversity, embracing what Ciseaux terms the other within. For Ciseaux, all discourse is built upon the hierarchy of man over woman. It all comes back to the man, she states, to his torment, his desire to be at the origin, back to the father. Therefore, she asks, what would happen to the order of the world in general if the rock upon which they founded this church should crumble? If some fine day it suddenly came out that the plan had always, inadmissibly, been to guarantee the masculine order a rationale equal to history itself. The Timeless Children poses a similar set of questions. What would happen to the Doctor if the rock upon which she was founded was to crumble? If it suddenly came out that she had lived multiple lives, male and female, white and black, prior to the one she recognises as her first, and that her memories of these lives had been repressed by her people, the Time Lords, in order to guarantee their masculine order a rationale equal to history itself. If her whole life so far had been, as put by the Master, a lie. Of course, there's something bigger going on here. When the Master tells the Doctor everything that you think you know is a lie, he's not just speaking to her, he's speaking to us, the viewers. This is, if you like, Chris Chibnall telling us that everything we, the fans, think we know about Doctor Who is about to be reassessed, by which I mean the show's canon. Facts like William Hartnell was the first Doctor, or the Time Lords were born with the ability to regenerate. But there's also another strand to this. Who told us these facts? From a behind-the-scenes perspective, who has decided what Doctor Who is and should be over its 57-year history? The answer is largely white middle-aged men. Essentially, Series 12 tells us that the first 57 years of Doctor Who have been dominated by a lie, both on-screen and off. But what actually is this lie? To put it bluntly, the patriarchy and white privilege. Which brings us back to the first 12 Doctors. Well, 13 if we include John Hurt. 13 actors, all male, all white, the majority middle-aged. We see this bias further reflected in the show's production staff. Prior to the Chibnall era, the show had only ever had 4 female writers. What's more, every single writer from 1963 to 2017 had been white. As you'll no doubt have realised, this is something which Chibnall has actively strived to put right, with the introduction of writers such as Mallory Blackman, Vinay Patel, Joy Wilkinson, Nina Metivier, Charlene James and Maxine Alderton. We've seen the historical transformed into a vehicle for cultural change, with stories about the American Civil Rights Movement, the partition of India, and the Pendle Witches, with Series 12 continuing this trend by shining the light on female historical figures like Ada Lovelace, Noor Inayat Khan, and Mary Shelley. The ginormous disruptions to Doctor Who canon in Series 12 are underpinned by exactly the same intentions. Firstly, there's the figure of the Timeless Child, first glimpsed in Spyfall Part 2, a young black child in oriental dress, almost word for word matching Cizzo's description of woman as invisible, foreign, secret, hidden, mysterious, black, forbidden, this nobody that is dressed up, wrapped in veils, carefully kept distant, pushed to the side of history and change. Fugitive of the Judoon takes things a step further with the introduction of the Fugitive Doctor, an incarnation literally pushed to the side of the Doctor's personal history, unbeknownst to her. Jo Martin's Doctor is absolutely intended as a headache for the Doctor and for Doctor Who fandom. She's everything the Doctor has never been, female and black. But the real icing on the cake here is that she is, ostensibly, from the character's past rather than from her future. Echoing the sentiments of Doctor Who fans everywhere, the 13th Doctor protests, "You can't be me. I know what I've done. I know my own life." On the contrary, the Timeless Children reveals there's a whole portion of the Doctor's life which has always been hidden from her, and from us. The story accords both the Doctor and the Time Lords a new origin story, with clear colonial undertones. Citing her own experience of growing up as an Algerian French girl, Cizzo recalls, "I saw that the great, noble, advanced countries established themselves by expelling what was strange, excluding it, but not dismissing it, enslaving it. A commonplace gesture of history. There have to be 2 races, the masters and the slaves." This is precisely how the Time Lords operate, according to this new interpretation of their history. A self-appointed ruling elite whose seemingly inherent ability to regenerate was in fact appropriated from another race, from the Timeless Child. One place in which the Timeless Children diverges from this template is in the character of Tek Taeun. Traditionally, states Cizzo, woman is the strangeness man likes to appropriate. But in the case of the Timeless Child, woman is appropriated by woman. Explicitly stated to be a member of Gallifrey's indigenous race, the Shobogans, Tek Taeun comes from a time which, in principle, is free from the biases which would ultimately dominate Time Lord power relations. That said, implicit in Tek Taeun and the child's relationship is of course a master-slave hierarchy. The stipulation that, as Cizzo states, the body of what is strange must not disappear, but its force must be conquered and returned to the master, which, she argues, is an inherently masculine trait. The reasoning behind the decision to give the Doctor an adoptive mother rather than an adoptive father is something I'll return to later on. For now, it's simply important to understand that, to all intents and purposes, Tek Taeun is in fact male, if not in body, in spirit. In direct contrast to Tek Taeun's masculine desire to appropriate is the child herself, and the phenomena of regeneration, which is presented as inherently female. Why? Because it represents boundless possibility. Look no further than her initial transformation into a young East Asian girl, and the montage that follows, which offers glimpses of 5 subsequent regenerations, the camera rotating round Tek Taeun's laboratory in one fluid, continuous movement, unconstrained by cuts, as she changes into a blonde white girl, a black-haired Asian boy, a brown-haired white boy, a short-haired light-skinned girl, and finally a black African teenager. Symbolically, the timeless child becomes a being who transcends boundaries of gender and race, who can live and die infinitely, who can be anything. Again quoting from Cizot, able to seamlessly transition between male and female bodies, she inhabits hims and hers just long enough to watch them, and goes on infinitely. Put alongside Tecteun, the distinction is clear. Implicit in these binaries is a power dynamic between the unknown and the known. To Tecteun, regeneration is a code which must be cracked, her insatiable, masculine desire to understand and to control dictating that it must be conquered. Moreover, in her view, it is the final binary which holds primary importance. Regeneration is a miracle not of possibility or variety, but of immortality. In order to become the base genetic code for the Time Lords, it must first be clinically isolated, hence Tecteun's relentless efforts to locate and extract the corresponding gene, and to finally splice it into herself. These opposing attitudes towards regeneration are highlighted by Tecteun's first transformation, by contrast to that of the child. Rather than change from female to female, or flitting endlessly between female and male forms, she makes a single transition from female to male, being granted a body which befits her innate masculinity. Any hint of femininity, or indeed of motherliness, is lost. This is the mould from which the whole of Time Lord civilization is founded. In keeping with the masculine need to appropriate and manipulate in order to maintain power, the regeneration process is capped so that it can only occur 12 times, thus making the infinite finite. The now male Tecteun joins two other male Time Lords to become the three founding fathers of Gallifrey. There's not a woman in sight. With the timeless child censored from their history in order to perpetuate a noble creation myth, literally pushing all traces of female influence to the side of their history, the Time Lords guarantee themselves a rationale equal to history itself. Regeneration is conquered and a patriarchy born. With regards to race, we cannot exactly say that the Time Lords are white supremacists, though they share many of the same attitudes, since Tecteun in her male form is of course non-white, as is another of the three founding fathers. On the one hand, both this and the decision to depict the original Tecteun as female rather than male might seem to undermine everything the story is trying to tell us the Time Lords represent. However, I would actually argue that this makes the story's argument more nuanced. After all, we've seen that Tecteun was ultimately more masculine in spite of her female body, that these ideologies can transcend the physical form, gender or skin colour of those who practice them. The second stage of my arguments will suggest that the Doctor's response to this seismic reveal, an initial identity crisis followed by an eventual reconciliation with her newly discovered past, offers the viewer a prism through which to assimilate the reveal for themselves, the opposing attitude of the Master representing the response of the irrational, stubborn, intolerant fan. The Doctor's response follows the progression of what Cizot terms finding the other within, essentially traits, thoughts or inclinations which do not, stereotypically, correspond to your gender or race. Remember that for the purposes of this essay, the Doctor is, up until the Timeless Children, still a man, in that none of the storylines of the 13th Doctor's era so far have properly explored what being female actually means for the character. Cizot stresses that finding the other within is not done without danger, without pain, without loss of moments of self, of consciousness, of persons one has been, goes beyond, leaves. It doesn't happen without expense, of sense, time or direction. This is precisely the predicament faced by the Doctor and the viewer, an identity crisis, if you will. The Doctor's immediate reaction is one of stubbornness, that Ruth can't be her, that she can't be the Timeless Child. This isn't a million miles away from the Master's response, though on a much less extreme, less violent scale. The Master is repulsed by the presence of Otherness within him, i.e. the Doctor's DNA, so much so that he destroys Gallifrey. In Ciseaux's words, like Tecteun before him, to the Master, a male, this permeability, this non-exclusion, is a threat. He delights in exposing the Doctor's true past to her and weaponising it against her, admitting, "I hope it's hurting, because it really hurt me." At first, he succeeds in making her feel scared, confused, and in denial, sentiments which echo those of many long-term fans of the show. After all, the ramifications for Doctor Who continuity are ginormous. How is it possible for the Doctor to have existed prior to William Hartnell's first incarnation? How many incarnations of the Timeless Child were there? And how do they fit into the pre-established, rigidly numbered, linear pantheon of Doctors? Such was the controversy surrounding this storyline that the BBC had to release an official statement on the matter, recognising that we understand that some people will feel attached to a particular idea they have of the Doctor. The conflict between this notion of the Doctor as fixed and the suggestion in The Timeless Children that they are in fact indefinable evokes the initial controversy surrounding Jodie Whittaker's casting as the Doctor. That after 54 years, the character should be played by anyone other than a white, middle-aged male, which in turn reflects the fundamental dichotomy between male and female, between rigidity and permeability. This debate is personified by the Doctor's exchange with the Fugitive Doctor, the former voicing the concerns of fans, asking, "Where do you fit into all this?" Ruth's response, "I don't have those answers, but say I did, would they even help?" is quite telling. Taking this back to the story's writer, to Chris Chibnall's whole vision for the show even, the implied answer here is no, of course those answers wouldn't help. We don't need them, they're irrelevant. It's no coincidence that the Fugitive Doctor is the polar opposite to William Hartnell's first in terms of gender and race. As I said before, she's the epitome of what the Doctor, historically, has never been. And it's no mistake that the show refuses to assign Jo Martin's Doctor a numerical title, offering us only the pseudonyms Ruth and the Fugitive. In my view, we'll never actually learn where she, or indeed any of the other Timeless Child incarnations, fit into the Doctor's timeline, because the resounding message of this episode is that it doesn't matter. I realise that for some, this is a step too far. What I would ask you to try and appreciate is the contextual significance of this particular story being told at this particular moment in time. That even if it tears up the Doctor Who rulebook and that angers or saddens you, the intentions underpinning this episode, this era, are completely sound and completely important. You need look no further than the Black Lives Matter movement, which re-emerged in the months after The Timeless Children was broadcast, following the death of George Floyd. And in the wake of this, the widespread calls for statues of slave traders to be removed, and for Britain's colonial past to be fully interrogated in school curriculums. A system of ordering the Doctors that insists on certain rules like each Doctor must have a number, and this order of Doctors must remain untouched forever, reproduces the desire to appropriate, to control, to protect that the episode criticises in Tecteun. Because knowledge is intrinsically linked to power, such a system inevitably leads to the creation of a master-slave hierarchy, and more detrimental, exclusive rules like every Doctor must be white, and every Doctor must be male. What we see in Tecteun is a behaviour that we, the fans, are guilty of. A form of fan entitlement, similar to that criticised in Victor Kennedy in Love and Monsters. Having accepted the other within her, the Doctor finally fits Ciseaux's description of woman as a traveller in unexplored places, literally rather than just superficially. In Ciseaux's words, she does not refuse, she approaches not to do away with the space between, but to see it, to experience what she is not, what she is, what she can be. In embracing the unknown, she becomes female, in spirit as well as body. Ciseaux argues that accepting the other sex as a component makes them much richer, more various, stronger. There is no invention possible without there being in the inventing subject an abundance of the other, or variety, and particularly relevant to the timeless children, the springing up of selves one didn't know. "You think you've broken me," the Doctor tells the Master. "You've given me a gift. Of myself. I contain multitudes more than I ever thought or knew. You want me to be scared of it because you're scared of everything. But I am so much more than you." Her triumph over him is not simply one of protagonist over antagonist, but also of creation over destruction, and ultimately of femininity over masculinity. Unlike the Master, the Doctor realises that passivity is, in Ciseaux's words, a non-closure that is not submission, but confidence and comprehension. That is not an opportunity for destruction, but for wonderful expansion. In shifting from a predominantly male mindset to this female one, the 13th Doctor reverses the process which led to her initial femininity, in the form of the Timeless Child, being constrained and replaced by masculinity, a move which, by extension, destabilises the stereotype of the character as a white, middle-aged male, and instead affirms that she has the potential to be anything. The Timeless Children's elevation of regeneration from simple plot device to an active celebration of diversity and otherness is laudable, and its radical reinvention of the Doctor as a beacon of feminine possibility, who literally has to contend with, in Ciseaux's words, whole populations issuing from her unconscious and the springing up of selves she didn't know, is inspired. All of this, of course, is a reaction against the subliminal gender and racial biases which, behind the scenes, have dominated the show's history up to this point. In my view, The Timeless Children is undeniably a landmark episode of Doctor Who, one which, through a careful recalibration of the show's past, lays the foundations for a diverse and exciting future. This video essay was adapted from a 4,000-word project written at the end of my second year of university. I really hope you enjoyed it. I know it's quite different to the type of thing I usually do, so please do let me know if you'd like to see more in the future. Do also subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you soon for some more new videos.